You are listening to Megan is Not a Parent, But. And today's episode is brought to you by Positive Parenting Class Pass. Positive Parenting Class Pass is 6 simple positive parenting classes to kickstart your positive parenting journey. You can start today at bekindcoaching.com/classpass. In today's episode, we will be talking about how you can release the dream of perfection for you and your child. Today's episode, I'm going to give a bit of a trigger warning. We're going to be talking about perfectionism, and we're going to be talking about white supremacy culture. And I find it interesting that I created this outline a year ago, and I didn't really know what this episode was truly going to be about. I knew the idea, I knew the theme, and how on topic this episode is for the theme of the week. White supremacy culture and perfection has been coming up a lot in a lot of different spaces. It came up in Monday Intentions. It's come up on lives. It's come up in other coaching spaces. And so I thought, when I was creating the slides and the message for today's podcast episode, I thought, wow, like what a cool invitation of alignment to say there's always, as you're showing up and doing the work, there's always happy, unexpected synchronicities. And today is definitely one of them. So I invite you, as you're listening, to take care of you, to get cozy, to grab your notebook, and let's dig in. I am going to start with a bold statement of perfection is a myth. Perfection is a myth. It is a fantasy that keeps us alive, and it keeps us a fantasy that keeps us going, and it can become a motivator, and it also can be a very strong demotivator. Perfection is this fantasy that is sold and makes companies millions, if not billions of dollars. It illuminates a lot of inadequacies, a lot of gaps. It puts a lot of pressure and triggers our nervous system into that threat response. It can be something that is extremely what is the word I'm looking for? Destabilizing. And it's in that destabilization that many people can come in and exploit. This conversation of perfectionism and children and releasing the dream child and the dream parent and really grieving that dream really circled around back for me inside of the episode that I recorded a few months ago with Dr. Kimberly Douglas of Value the Connection Over Grades. And inside that episode, she talks about how our society drives wedges between the parent and the child. And that wedge that's driven between the parent and the child through grades, through notes home, through disciplinary actions, through this idea that there's bad kids or bad parents, that wedge is very profitable. And in that episode, she talks about how she's been watching the work that I do, and how the work that I do is helping parents remove that wedge and value the relationship between the parent and the child, prioritizing and valuing the quality of that relationship. And so I want you to know that in my spaces, we aim to remove those wedges. We aim to remove those blocks. We aim to remove those spaces that keep us stuck in cycles that drain us, and begin to widen our empathetic connection. And as we widen that empathetic connection, your children benefit from that. Not only are you modeling and passing down those tools for them, but then they go into their classrooms, into their spaces, and start to share those tools and that work with their community. And that's how we start to change a lot of the broken systems, the systems that are benefiting people in power. That's how we start to do that work. So I say that this space is powerful. Even just you listening, I just want to honor if you've made it this far. Like, I honor you in this work because today's episode, called Releasing the Dream Child and the Dream Parent, is about pulling back the veil on perfectionism and starting to really, again, realign, get back in flow of valuing that parent-child relationship. And I'm going to do it 2 ways. Today, we're going to discuss a document that breaks down perfectionism. And then we're going to read a chapter from a book that invites us to check our attachment to perfectionism and really check that dream that that we were sold. And all of this, again, is part of learning and practicing positive parenting. And when we learn and practice positive parenting in our relationships, that is a form of social justice work. Because in our society, children are the oppressed community. And when we're starting to value and empower a child's voice in your homes, when we're starting to speak boundaries, when we're trying to offer choices, when we're doing the work to unlearn and relearn all of those tools that we were inherited, that were passed down to us, your children are now starting to break cycles, be part of that breaking cycle community, and start to take action in going out into the world, into their own relationships, and strengthening those tools for themselves. So the document that we're going to start out with today is, we're going to read from this document that was created and curated by the Minnesota Historical Society, called White Supremacy Culture. And this document actually comes from and is built from the resource on the right called Dismantling Racism, a resource book. And when we're talking about perfectionism, I wanted to go right to a direct source so that we can really start to read and learn right from it. So I'm going to bring it up. If you're listening to this podcast, you can find the slides and you can see the resources that I'm sharing here right on the YouTube channel. So if you want to see what I'm actually showing and talking through and walking through, I invite you to check out this episode there. All right, so this is the resource. It's a 119-page document breaking down dismantling racism. And I really just wanted to read from this paragraph speaking about the Dismantling Racism Project. So the Dismantling Racism Project is a part of Western States Race Research and Action for Change and Equity program. Through training, strategizing, and technical assistance, the Dismantling Racism Project is one strategy intended to increase the breadth and depth of racial justice work in the region through supporting organizations to build a shared analysis of race and racism, to engage in anti-racist organizational development, and to move racial justice organizing campaigns. The DR project strengthens the capacity of individuals and organizations doing racial justice work in the West by developing anti-racist leaders, providing training and support to organizations, and creating resources for use throughout the region. So why do I want to start here? Because you are the leader in your family organization. Sure, this document is used for going into companies, but I'm going to invite us to open up and think like, oh, wait, I'm the leader in my family. And this work is so important for me to deconstruct within my own family, because children are learning from you. They're looking for the model for you. They're looking to have those conversations for you. So this document that is created, and I'll share the link in the caption or in the show notes, so that you can go and dig deeper into these resources. The very first trait that they break down is perfectionism. And I don't think that's, obviously it's not an accident that that's the first one, because perfectionism is so rampant. So to break down perfectionism, this document talks and defines perfectionism as little appreciation expressed among people for the work that others are doing. Appreciation that is expressed, usually directed to those who get the most of the credit anyways. So if we take this moment and we think about it, what this is inviting us to think about is, are we inviting everyone's and celebrating everyone's messy action? Do we see and value and celebrate the strengthening of skills, the practice of skills? And I think a very real example of this is when we talk about test grades, when we talk about report cards. Are we saying things like, oh, well, why is that a B? How can you make it an A? Are we valuing that pressure to be producing more, being more productive for that outcome? And then the second part of this, Appreciation that is expressed usually is directed to those who get the most of the credit anyway. So in our families, we can think about that as, are we starting to compare children? Are we comparing ourselves like, oh, well, they always do it, or I never do it? Are we starting to shift away from appreciating ourselves and our own mistakes and giving it to people who are already doing it? Are we valuing that perfection within our home? The second bullet point is more common. It's more common to point out either how the person or work is inadequate. And this is where we're starting to focus on the things that we could be doing better or should be doing better, or it's like, yeah, but it could have been done differently, versus saying like, hey, this is how I showed up, and this is how I'm growing, and this is how I'm learning. Again, this process of valuing or devaluing perfection and valuing that process. The third point, or even more common, to talk to others about the inadequacies of a person or their work without even talking to them directly about it. So this is where we start to get into spaces of gossip or positioning of power to say, well, at least, I'm not like that person, or at least I don't do that. It's again valuing that perfection is the ideal here. The next bullet point is mistakes are seen as personal, i.e. they reflect badly on the person making them, as opposed to being seen for what they really are, mistakes. And that in my spaces of learning, we hone in on the value of mistakes are opportunities to learn. And even as I was sharing off camera, I had lit incense last night and it inflamed my sinuses. And a member, Steph, said, we're learning through doing. And sure enough, that's me. I'm learning through doing. Instead of making mistakes personal to me or to other people. The next bullet point is making a mistake is confused with being a mistake. Doing wrong with being wrong. So thinking about in our own lives when we make those mistakes, like what is our inner talk like? How is it that we talk to ourselves in reconciling that mistake? Are we going in to quickly punish ourselves because that is something that we are used to doing? Is it something that we then think, like I shouldn't be doing this, or I don't want to do this anymore. Like, why am I doing this? Like, do I go to hypercritical self-talk, again, rooted in perfectionism? Like, if only I was perfect, then I wouldn't have to do this, and I'm making mistakes, and that means I'm not perfect. I'm not worthy of this or whatever it is. And I would say that we give what we hold. And so when we're holding on to self-criticism, we're modeling self-criticism, and we're passing down self-criticism. So again, this invitation to really check in that system, lean into re-identifying our relationships and redefine our relationships with those mistakes. The next bullet point is little time, energy, or money put into reflection or identifying lessons learned that can improve practice. In other words, little or no learning from those mistakes, right? When we make those mistakes, and it comes to mind the Taylor Swift anti-hero lyric, where it says, now I'm thinking about it, stare at the sun rather than look in the mirror, right? Where instead of becoming self-reflective and starting to take accountability for our actions, accountability for our learning, accountability for our own behaviors in the mistake making, so that we can improve and learn and grow, we start to become defensive over mistakes. We avoid making mistakes. We play small so that we can be safe in making those mistakes. And as we're doing that, we're again valuing perfectionism, and we're valuing not only showing up, but we're passing down that perfection is the goal. And then the final one is tendency to identify what is wrong, little ability to identify, name, and appreciate what is right. And thinking about this when we're learning and growing, It's easy to be like, well, yeah, but it could have been better, or yeah, well, still didn't do it how I wanted to do it. And what that is doing, with what's calling out that tendency, is where we'll nitpick apart, right? Because we're not doing it just right. And when we're valuing that, when we're doing that, it's keeping us stuck in making those same mistakes over and over and over again. It's blocking our learning and growing. It's protecting us from feeling discomfort. It's protecting us from feeling anger, from feeling confusion, from feeling discomfort. I think I said that twice. That's how powerful valuing perfection is. And I have to be honest, even in reading this, the perfectionism is coming up in me. And I'm doing work in real time. Every time I stumble over a word, or every time I take a too long of a pause, like I can hear that little voice pop up. And so I share this and say, I'm not immune to it. I'm aware of it and constantly doing the work to reconcile through it, even now as I'm talking about it. So in this document, they also share some antidotes. So antidotes are: develop a culture of appreciation, of self-appreciation, and appreciation of your family members, appreciation for who they are. Another antidote is where the organization or family takes time to make sure that people's work and efforts are appreciated. And the work that I do, that's a space within family meetings where we start with compliments, where we lead with acknowledgments, where we talk about what we want to see more of, not what we want to see less of. This is all, I'm just trying to draw the parallel so that we can start to see the tools that we learn in positive parenting are the antidotes to perfectionism. We start to develop a learning organization where it is expected that everyone will make mistakes, and those mistakes offer opportunities for learning, right? Mistakes are opportunities to learn. Mistakes are not moments to be punished. Those are moments to invite us into saying, hey, what is it here that I can learn and grow from? Another antidote is where people can recognize that mistakes sometimes lead to positive results. I think that this one is the most magic of all of them. And I think about times where I'm like running late for something, or I miss an appointment, or even when I just make a mistake in my general life, and how that leads to innovation, or that leads to doing something differently, or it leads to a moment to self-reflect and ask, why do I do it that way? And is that way still serving me? And in the space of positive parenting, we talk about positive, we're looking at positive outcomes on the development of your child and the development of your relationship with your child. And through that process is all about making mistakes. Yes, like Tisha says, you put the wrong ingredients and the meal is better. Exactly. It leaves that room for valuing that. It also helps separate the person from the mistake. And it also invites that when offering feedback, always speak to the things that went well before offering criticism. Here we can see we lead with connection before offering that limit or guidance or redirection. We always lead with connection first, because it invites us to feel safe, feel seen, heard, understood, and bring in that space to connect. And then finally, ask people to offer specific suggestions for how to do things differently when offering criticism. So again, this is an invitation to open up and be open to other points of views. And that's something that's practiced in all of my spaces, is a space to come, see things from all different sides, and start to really reconcile, what starts to feel in alignment with my values so that I can improve, learn, and grow. So I just wanted to really start there, our discussion there, because perfection is rampant in parenting spaces. And truly, I think that when we're valuing perfection, it's incongruent with valuing process work. And you'll hear me say it over and over again. We need to lean into the process over the product. We need to value the process over the product. In my coaching spaces, when we talk about wins, we talk about that wins are any movement forward. We're talking about messy wins. We're talking about making messy and taking messy actions. And in that space, we're starting to deconstruct perfectionism. We're starting to feel safe in doing the wrong thing, knowing that doing that wrong thing doesn't mean that we're bad or they're bad. Doing that wrong thing invites us to say, how did that outcome land? And what is it that we want to do different next time? And so when we're holding on to those beliefs of perfection, when we value perfection, or we think we should be perfect, or when we think about, our child ought to be perfect in school or in their world, in their life with their friends, like they shouldn't be, quote unquote, misbehaving. When we're valuing that perfection or feel threat with the loss of perfection, when we're trying to learn and grow and start to practice and doing something new, that will invite in resistance. It will invite in frustration, because we're trying to hold two beliefs that reject each other, essentially. To value process work is to devalue perfection. And when we're talking about releasing this dream that we had, a dream parent and the dream child, when we're talking about releasing that dream, it's inviting us to get into connection with our own process, with our own story, with finding our own way. And this leads so beautifully into the next part, the excerpt that I want to read, the chapter that I want to read, that releasing that dream child and dream parent, those roles and expectations will help you do your part. When we release perfectionism, when we release having to do it the right way, or feeling threat when we're doing it the quote unquote wrong way, that will shift us away from being present. It'll shift us into regulating and controlling and enforcing, where it shifts us away from doing our part, which is what we talked about in our last podcast. So right now, I want to read from chapter 4 of Raising Your Spirited Child. In this book, it takes a deep dive into temperament, and it takes a look at just showing up in ways for you to meet your child. And when I was thinking about this episode, I thought, oh yeah, I definitely want to do something different. I was going to summarize this chapter, but I really think I think there's going to be value in reading it. So I invite you to, just again, get open and listen as we're talking through matches and mismatches, and really bringing in this practice of releasing our dream child, no longer valuing perfection in ourselves or in our children, and starting to look at how do parents and kids fit together, and how we as the adult can start to take ownership of our role in that. So we're going to start with a quote from Albert Einstein, that each of us shines in a different way, but that doesn't make our lights less bright. Again, we're valuing differences. We're valuing different points of view. We're valuing that we each have a different expectation and experience, and really learning in to value that experience. All right. So I'm just going to start with the chapter now. Gretchen was always the last parent to talk in the group. Her dark eyes drank in the words and gestures of others, but her comments were rare and far apart. Her daughter, Asher, was the kind of kid you felt before you heard, and heard before you saw bursting into the room. The temperamental portrait Gretchen saw was not the dream child she had hoped for. I've never imagined having a baby like Asher, she said. I thought I would spend hours cuddling her, talking and singing with her, but Asher was born kicking. She never liked to be cuddled unless she chose it. As a baby, she wanted to be carried, looking out at the world. I remember when she was 14 months old, I was holding her in my lap, sobbing, thinking, why can't you be like the other kids? Why can't I do the right things to make you like the child I expected you to be? I tried talking to my wife about it, but she got angry when I told her. It just wasn't an issue for her, but it was for me. I had this phantom child in my mind. I knew how she was supposed to look and act and what our relationship would be like, but our reality was so opposite. This section is called Letting Go of the Dream Child. The temperamental portrait of your child presents to you. The temperamental portrait your child presents to you may not be the one you expected or wanted to see. For you, like Gretchen, letting go of your quote unquote dream child may be one of the most difficult tasks you face as a parent. You might find yourself grieving, mourning, or the loss of the child that never materialized. The realization hits. There isn't a quick fix. There isn't 10 easy steps to success or a perfect punishment that would make your spirited child into that dream child. Your grief can blind you. It can prevent you from seeing the unique qualities of your child. It can force you to expend your time and energy desperately trying to change your child, to make her fit your expectations of the quote unquote perfect child, the child that doesn't really exist. Julius Siegel once wrote, "To reject kids' distinctive natures is to deny one of the central facts of human development. The extraordinary range of individual differences that characterize children from the moment of their birth." I really want to resonate there and see how it connects back to deconstructing perfectionism. When we're letting go of the dream child, we're grieving that idea that was sold to us, that was told to us, like, this is what it will look like. We see it in movies. We see it in social media. We see it in a lot of different spaces. This message that gets implanted in us, okay, like this is what it's going to be like, and I'm going to be in control over it, and it's going to happen exactly how I like it. And really this process of seeing how that sets us up for, again, resistance, and for resisting that process of connecting and valuing our relationship, which is the title of the next section, Focusing on Relationships. A spirited child comes to us with not only distinct physical characteristics, but a built-in predisposition to be spirited as well. We do not have control over our child's basic temperament, but we do choose to alter our response to them. We can stop thinking of our child as the problem and instead focus our energies on discovering more effective ways to relate, to work together, and to enjoy each other's company. In having conversation with me, Jerome Keegan, a researcher from Harvard University, said, "We try to change our loved ones, and then when we can't, we get friction and conflict. People are not all that changeable. One of the greatest tragedies in human interaction is that we believe will change everything, and it can't. It is all right to shed your tears, to lament the fantasies that never materialize, but your child needs you to move on, to let go of that image of the dream child so that it does not interfere with your relationship with your spirited child. Now is the time to begin focusing on your child and discovering how to work with their particular temperamental style in everyday basis, to find the beauty in their portrait." Working together, the ties between temperament and discipline. Tall with a barrel chest and dark, thick beard and a baseball cap pulled low over his eyes, Kevin shoved back from the table, growling. "I don't get it. What does any of this have to do with discipline?" I leapt to my feet, grabbed a dry erase marker, and drew flames. Fortunately, despite my severe artistic challenge, they were identifiable. "How do you put out a fire?" I asked. "Water," Kevin snapped. "Well, what if the fire is a grease fire?" I continued. He rolled his eyes at me before replying. "Well, then turn off the burner and smother it with baking soda." "Well, what if it's a forest fire?" Exasperated, Kevin flung his arms in the air. The others jumped in, shouting out answers until we had a detailed list. Do a back burn, make a clear cut, use a fire retardant. As the room quieted down, I asked, "What happens if you throw water on a grease fire?" "It will spread like crazy," Jason, our resident firefighter, stated authoritatively. "And if it's a campfire, we are going to want to do a back burn," I continued. "No," the group retorted in unison. "Right," I declared, pumping my hand in the air. "In order to select the most effective strategy to put out the fire, you have to know what's burning." Temperament helps you identify the fuel source, the feelings and needs behind the flames of your child's challenging behaviors. When you are the parent of a spirited child, every day can feel like a crapshoot. Time after time, your child melts down and you have no idea what just happened or why. It makes you feel so powerless and inept inept that you want to raise your hands and surrender, questioning, why me? Why did I get this child? Recognizing that there are patterns to their behavior that allow you to predict the potential combustion points suddenly shifts the odds in your favor. It's possible to identify the fuel source, to cut it out at least sometimes, to take appropriate precautions, and when necessary, select the most effective approach to prevent the flames of misbehavior from spreading. Research demonstrates that if you think your child is spoiled or just crying, you tend to respond harshly. You don't believe his signals or needs. Understanding temperament allows you to identify what the need is and respond compassionately. You can appreciate the challenges your child is facing instead of thinking he's trying to embarrass you. Discipline and punishment are not synonymous. Discipline means guiding. Knowledge of temperament allows you to be a skilled guide. In the chapters that follow, I will help you see the connection between everyday hassles and your child's temperament. Once you've identified the connections, you can develop strategies that will work through each particular temperamental issue. I am going to stop reading in there and invite you to continue on if this message resonates. I wanted to share that this work is the process of learning you and your needs while learning your child and your child's needs. And this whole process of devaluing and deconstructing that dream that we have of how I thought I was going to show up, or the things that I said I would definitely do, or the things I would say I would never do. And then here I am finding myself doing those things, shifting away from that perfect dream ideal of the parent I was supposed to be. And it invites us to connect again to ourselves and our reality and hold that truth for our children, being able to devalue and deconstruct the perfection that we're projecting onto them, and allows us to connect to them and see, hey, they are their own person, their own human, with their own experiences, with their own points of views and perspectives, and their own needs as well. And just like it said in that chapter, when we know the diagnosis of the fire, it invites us to connect in ways that are a support and not a further stress. I thought this episode is just a really great way to connect these two conversations together. And the invitation that's being presented to you in today's episode is to open up and really check and value that process of deconstructing the fantasy of the dreams, grieving that perfect fantasy that was sold to you that maybe you've been holding on to, that so many of us were sold and hold on to, so that we can start to begin valuing those relationships in our home. Because your child is asking for you, they're needing you, they're wanting you, and you are wanting the same. So finding those ways and getting into spaces that support your growth, that support your messy moments, for supporting your perspective taking and becoming self-reflective in a safe space, so that you can start to offer and honor that in them. So in closing, I invite you to consider, does Gretchen's story from raising your spirited child, did Gretchen's stories feel familiar to you? Either was that your experience being raised with a parent who was projecting their dream of who you should have been onto you, or maybe from Gretchen's direct experience of knowing, like, hey, this isn't what I thought it was going to be, or this isn't what I wanted it to be. The next question I have is, what does it feel like to learn that positive parenting is social justice work, that learning and growing and developing these tools and skills of positive parenting is inviting collaboration, it's inviting empowerment, it's inviting valuing that process work, so that your children are going out into the world and doing that as well. Anti-racism work and white supremacy culture are big topics that are making headlines, and we see it in our government, and we see it in so many other different spaces, that you have a role in that as well. empowering your children so that they can go out and help empower others. And the final question is, this work is often uncomfortable and angering and confusing and all those things. And the invitation that's being offered is your relationship worth that investment? Is it worth the investment of deconstructing, of meeting yourself, of becoming self-reflective, of noticing your mistakes, of honoring and valuing those mistakes, knowing that those are moments and lessons and opportunities that are guiding you towards that connection with your family? So now, if you've taken notes or if you have any thoughts or takeaways, I want to know. I love hearing how this work shapes you and the action you take on this work, and the lessons you go out and implement from this work. And there's many ways that you can share that. You can share that on Apple Podcasts and leave a review sharing what this work has meant for you. You can also leave your thoughts and takeaways on social media and tag me. I was just tagged this week by Devin, who's here in the Zoom room now. And I love seeing how this work in this community impacts you. It allows me to share it and allows others to know that it's safe to enter into these spaces as well. And you can also share your thoughts and insights in our dedicated posts inside of our Facebook community, Positive Parenting with Megan Ford. I want to say thank you. Thank you for tuning in, and thank you for staying to the end. My mission in life is to help support parents and feeling supported and empowered in doing this work. This podcast, my Facebook community, and all of my programs are designed to help parents work through the phases of awareness, education, and practice so that they can start valuing that process in their homes. If you are ready to take the next step and you're ready to dig into the work, I invite you to check out Positive Parenting Class Pass, especially class number 2, all about emotional validation. Inside of this class, it'll help you balance your parenting toolbox by helping you connect with your child in a way that helps them feel safe, seen, and heard. If you're ready to get started, you can dig into classes today at bekindcoaching.com/classpass. And as my free gift to you, you will get access to Raising Respectful Kids, which inside of video 2, we dig into temperaments, and you are given an assessment so that you can go through and assess your child's temperament and your own temperament, just like what we were talking about today. And with that, my friends, we are coming to an end, and I cannot wait to see you all next time.